This is Caring for Kids on News Talk 760 WJR. Presented by the Children's Foundation. And here's your host, President and CEO of the Children's Foundation, Larry Burns.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our February 2021 edition of Caring for Kids. Tonight, as usual, we have a great lineup of local leaders who are all playing an active role in the health and wellness of children and their families. Joining us will be Nicole McKinney, the Executive Director of Friends of the Children, Detroit, Kevin Roach, Chief Executive Officer of Methodist Children's Home, and Cheryl Johnson, Chief Executive Officer of Cots. It's all coming up next on Caring for Kids, here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
It's Caring for Kids with Larry Burns.
Welcome back, everybody. Larry Burns here in Detroit, actually in Birmingham right now. And we're going to welcome our first guest. Joining me now is Nicole McKinney. Nicole is the current and inaugural Executive Director of Friends of the Children Detroit, which launched in January of 2020. Prior to joining Friends of the Children, Nicole spent 19 years at two separate United Ways in various leadership positions, most recently developing college and career readiness for students. In 2018, Nicole was elected to the Birmingham Public Schools Board, and in 2019, she was appointed to the State Teacher Tenure Commission by our Governor, Gretchen Whitmer. She's the only African American to serve on each of these committees. So, Nicole, welcome to Caring for Kids. So Nicole is a new partner of the Children's Foundation. Tell our listeners about Friends of Children and then specifically about the grant you recently received.
Sure. So Friends of the Children Detroit is a new nonprofit mentoring organization in Detroit. We launched in January of 2020.
Right.
So
Awesome.
We're a year old. We're part of a national network of 22 chapters across the country. Our goal is to end generational poverty, and we do that in a very unique way with a model that has proven success. We pair mentors one-to-one with a child, a vulnerable child who has experienced adverse childhood experiences. We use paid professional mentors, and they mentor a child from the age of 4 to 6 years old up until they graduate from high school. And we have 3 long-term outcomes in mind. One is to ensure that our children graduate from high school or obtain a GED, that they stay away from the juvenile justice system, and that we prevent teen pregnancy. And so all of our mentors have a college degree, experience working with youth, and they spend 4 hours a week with their mentees for a total of 16 hours a month.
Wonderful. Well, I was in higher ed for 27 years and recruited a lot of first-generation students. And so I know how important it is to mentor kids. One of the things I learned is that you don't start mentoring them in high school. It might be too late. Mm-hmm. So you starting early is so very, very important. And so I commend you for doing that. And so that's great. So you launch in January of 2020, and then in March, the pandemic hits. And so how has that impacted your initial sort of startup, and then how have you adjusted?
Correct. And I didn't address your last question about how your grant has helped us, so I'll add that.
Good.
So we had to adapt our model. Typically, our model is in-person mentoring. As I mentioned, 4 hours a week with youth. 2 hours of that is in school, and 2 hours is outside of the school doing extracurricular activities. So we had to adapt our model to a virtual environment. And it actually created an opportunity for us. We've been able to do some group mentoring, some bringing the families together that we wouldn't have done otherwise in our traditional model. Our mentors are able to zoom into some of the classes with their children, which helps to increase attendance. A lot of our families, as you can imagine, have struggled as a result of the pandemic. And so your grant dollars has helped to fill the gap for those families. We received a $40,000 grant from Children's Foundation to provide technology support and basic needs. So we were able to, our families were struggling with the virtual learning environment. So we were able to provide laptops to the children, some boosters so that they could get better Wi-Fi access, and also just some basic needs like food, bedding, pots and pans. One boy had outgrown his car seat, so we were able to replace it. Yeah,
that's really important.
yeah, very important.
Yep.
Yeah, because you're not supposed to buy a used one. So yeah.
Yeah, one of our focus areas, as you might know, is safety, and we do a lot of car seat programs, so that I'm familiar with. So that's extremely important. And we're talking with Nicole McKinney, Executive Director of the Friends of the Children Detroit.
Correct.
And so you've adjusted, and there's a lot of things in the pandemic that hopefully we can turn into positive things, and it sounds like you're doing that. And then when we get into more of a normal situation, we can continue some of those things and then get back to the things that we want to do in person. And one of the terms or words I hear a lot of is resiliency, and it's never been more important than right now because of all the issues we're all facing. So adults need to be resilient so that they can teach their children to be resilient. And so how is the resiliency sort of factored into what are some of the things that you might do or your mentors might do in that arena?
It's a really good question. So one of the things that we've had our caregivers do is use an app that we're piloting called Mentor Hub. It's helping them to check in on their mental wellness and suggesting some other apps that they can use to kind of calm them because of some of the life stressors that they're experiencing. We're also, our mentors are using reading enrichment activities with the children, trying to help fill the gap of their learning through the virtual environment. So we're just doing some of those activities to offset the experience of the children and their caregivers during this difficult time.
Yeah, so even in normal times, resiliency is important, but as I said, it's never been more important than it is right now. And so you have a year under your belt, so to speak, with this organization and looking forward. And let's assume we come out of the pandemic sometime this year. At least that's my hope. And so what do you see in the future for Friends of the Children Detroit and our listeners? Also, how can they help you and get involved or to donate or anything else that you need?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we're one of 22 chapters across the country. And so we're one of the newest chapters, and some of our peer chapters are serving hundreds of children and have several $1 million in their budget. So we hope to get to that level. We're just getting started. Each year, our plan is to add an additional cohort. We work with cohorts.
Right.
So we have 32 children in our cohort. So this year, we'll have 64 children. We also support the caregivers of those children as well. So in the next several years, we hope to continue to grow each year by adding an additional cohort. Because we raised the $1.5 million that was needed to bring a chapter to Detroit, it is up to the community now to sustain it. So we do need to increase funding so that we can sustain our chapter now that it's here in Detroit.
Wonderful. So you had to raise $1.5 million to have the chapter.
Correct.
And how long did it take you to do that?
It actually took us 3 years.
Okay, good for you.
Yeah,
you stayed with, that's resilience.
Yes, you're right. It is resiliency. So that's what we do in Detroit, right?
Right, exactly. We survive and we grow. And so you mentioned cohort, so that I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that those 32 kids you will follow from one grade to the next grade and hopefully the 32 will remain 32. And then you'll have a cohort of 50, let's say, and then another cohort. So these children and their families will get to know each other pretty well over the years.
Yes, they will. And that's a good point. Now, in our traditional model, we really don't have a lot of opportunities to bring the families and the children together. But because of the pandemic, we were able to do that virtually. So some of the children were able to spend the holidays doing a movie night through Zoom. The families, we developed an advisory board, brought them together. And so what it did is it allowed us to let them see that we're here for the long haul, to demonstrate our commitment to them, particularly during the pandemic and the holidays. And so it was So that's how we've been able to develop our relationship with them. And typically, on average, a mentor stays 5 to 7 years. And around middle school is when the transition happens, when the child gets a different mentor, because in the middle school model, they don't like the mentor to be in the school as much.
Right.
And so it changes around middle school. But yes, on average, our mentors stay with the child for 5 to 7 years.
Wonderful. We have now 116 partners. You're one of them. But we have a number of those partners that I know you can get connected to over time, like Midnight Golf is a mentoring program for seniors in high school.
Yes.
And then we also, the Children's Foundation just took on the local Detroit chapter for First Tee, which is a mentoring program using golf and golf etiquette and things of that nature to teach kids. And so there'll be a number of ways that you being part of our family hopefully will benefit your organization over time. So I look forward to that. We're just getting started, as I like to say. So
thank you. I love to hear that.
Wonderful. And so how can people help you?
So they can help by going to our page, friendsdetroit.org,
That's
learning
easy.
more about our organization, share the link with friends. They can make a donation on our page as well. And then there's one other thing, if I can, that I didn't mention in the interview, is that when our mentors meet with their mentees, they always meet around intentionality. So you talked about resilience. And so there's 5 roadmap goals that our mentors meet with their mentees on, and they track this in our efforts to outcome database. And that's school success, pro-social development, improved health, making good choices, and plans and skills for the future. So that's where that resiliency comes in.
Those are great things. And very similar to First Tee has 9 different things they're trying to achieve, but they're all very, very related. In a nutshell, that's what the Children's Foundation is all about. And we're much more focused now on families, because I like to say, just as a layperson, that if you have a dysfunctional family, chances are you're going to have some dysfunctional children. Reverse of that, if you have a family that's resilient and strong, you're most likely going to have children that are the same. So you're doing great work. Keep it up. 1 year, a year from now, it'll be 2, and hopefully 20 years from now, it'll be 20 years. So, Nicole, thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry, for having me.
You're welcome. That was Nicole McKinney, Executive Director of Friends of the Children, Detroit. And coming up next, we're going to hear from Kevin Roach about his great work at Methodist Children's Home. When Caring for Kids continues, here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR, presented by the Children's Foundation.
Well, that was a great interview with Nicole McKinney from Friends of the Children Detroit, one of our newest partners. You know, I love those mentoring programs, starting early, staying with kids with a cohort. That's how you change decades, in my opinion, of being underserved and poverty through these kind of programs and education. So the Children's Foundation is just delighted to have partners like that. And so we're also delighted to have a partner like Kevin Roach. Kevin is the Chief Executive Officer of Methodist Children's Home, a role he has held since 2015. Kevin has 15 years of leadership in the child welfare and the nonprofit world, having served in a variety of settings and with diverse populations and organizations across the country. Kevin has led Methodist Children's Home through an ambitious strategic plan, a major capital renovation, securing national accreditation, launching new programs, increasing revenue, and increasing the number of children and families served. So, Kevin, welcome to Caring for Kids, and your tie looks great. It's the Children's Foundation colors, so thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to rent in Rome, dress for the occasion.
Yeah, well, you're a smart man. I knew that already, but you look great. So Kevin, tell our listeners about your organization. Talked a little bit about it in the intro, and most importantly, the key services that you're providing.
Yeah, Larry, we just certainly on everybody at Methodist Children's Home Society, but most importantly, our children and our families that we serve. We are certainly appreciative and humbled with the opportunity to be here. As I tell folks, this is not our first pandemic. So we were started over 100 years ago.
Right.
And it was really in light of the Spanish flu influenza that certainly swept across the globe at that time. And so we started out as kind of your orphanage type setting, but through those years have evolved and have grown to be more than just residential care, but also include foster care, adoption, and transitional living. But we made the pivot a couple of years ago to really start to focus in on our community based services, looking at child abuse prevention, looking at citizen reentry, and looking at that intergenerational gap as we found that so many of our children were being cared for by seniors and really adding in that senior service component. And then the last piece is really embarking on a trauma informed education for our children, and that would be a charter school. So we certainly have evolved over those
Wow,
years.
you certainly have.
Yeah.
So the founders would be very proud of what this organization has turned into and evolving into. And that leads me into the next question and comment. One is congratulations. You yourself and your organization received a really important award from Crane's Detroit Business recently. And so in reading that, being one of our partners, I was very proud. And being your friend, I was proud for you. So tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, this was the 2020 Crane's Best Managed Nonprofit
Yeah.
Award. And certainly something when we thought about this year, the challenges that we faced, the obstacles that so many nonprofits have had to go through, just being in the company of a number of wonderful organizations on this end. And I think they recognized us in terms of our response to the pandemic and this emphasis or this focus on taking care of those who are caring for our children and families. We had that blend of both the essential care employees as well as, of course, all the other programs and services that we wanted to continue doing. And so when Cranes came calling and announced that or had shared that we had been nominated and wanted to dig in deeper about what we had done, everything from the appreciation pay that we were giving to our employees, our response to the racial injustice that had been long overdue back in the early summer, and of course, even some of the transformational changes that were taking place in the child welfare system. It was really, once again, something that spotlighted the team and just was happy that I had a little part in that bigger award for the
Yeah.
150 plus employees that were at Methodist.
Yeah, well, that is so cool. And it all
Yeah.
starts with you, the leader. So congratulations on that. And if there's anything else you want to mention that you're most proud of because of that, I don't know if anything sticks out as it relates to not so much the award. The award's great, but
Yeah.
something that you're really most proud of, particularly this last year we've been in this pandemic.
Well, I can say, Larry, that as you alluded to, our founders must be proud of where we are at and kind of the struggle, the challenges, and how they grew and seized the crisis as really meaningful opportunity to better serve the children and families. I'm most proud of that. That 100 years later, we went through some of the same things. We still see some of the old photos of kids
Right.
coming into our program in 1917 with masks, and the fact that we were able to grow and continue to have a larger impact on the community, the determination, the resilience, the passion of our team to say that, yeah, we have something that we really still don't have a playbook on. But the fact that we actually grew and served more children and families and ensured that those needs were met, um, it's just um, it's just amazing to think about what they did and what they didn't give up on.
Yeah, wonderful. So we're talking with Kevin Roach. He's the leader of Methodist Children's Home. So regarding the name, we have 116 partners. Many of them historically had some religious affiliation. Some still do. We have some Jesuit high schools. We have the Jewish Federation. We have a number of things. And so to our listeners that aren't familiar, explain the name and is there still an affiliation with the Methodist Church?
Yeah, we are. That's a great question and something that I'm asked frequently. And so I'm glad to be able to speak to that. And the fact that it's really, for all intents and purposes, something that's deep in our historical roots. Uh, Part of the founders of Methodist Children's Home Society were two devout Methodist women, one of whom happened to be married to S.S. Kresge.
Oh, okay.
And so Anna Kresge and her partner in crime at the time, Sophie Sprague, certainly like so many of the other wonderful organizations that are out there was historical, religious, faith-based elements to it. But for us currently in our state, we are non-sectarian, serving people of all backgrounds, all orientations, all faiths in that case. And so it's something that we've talked about internally,
Hmm.
but it hasn't gone beyond that on this end. But it's still a nod to those whose shoulders we stand on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I commend you for sticking with that as well. And so, as a partner of the Children's Foundation, I always like to talk a little bit about the program that we supported with our partners. So, can you share a little bit of that with our listeners?
Absolutely. We were so grateful for that opportunity to partner with the Children's Foundation and really focusing on this notion of what happens to the child prior to coming into the foster care system. And if there was a role that we could play in preventing them from even coming to us, we like to say that we want to work ourselves out of business. But partnering up with the Children's Foundation, I think we actually took a deliberate step to do that and
Mm.
say that any child that has to receive services from Methodist Children's Home Society, something went wrong. Now, if there's a way that we can intervene early and offer these child abuse prevention services, case management, psychosocial educational parent empowerment groups, and a resource bank, all of which was funded and partnered with the Children's Foundation on, um, we were excited to do that. And our goal was to be able to parlay or leverage that into additional support, which we were able to do.
Yeah,
That end.
that is music to my ears. And one of the other things we're trying to do, and with partners like you, we're doing it. So we want to try to connect our partners with each other. And you and I have a similar partner in Life Remodeled. You have space at Durfee,
Yes.
which is awesome. And we're in discussions with Chris Lambert and you and I and about some other projects in the future,
Yeah.
which I'm extremely excited about. But, the fact that you are partnering already with several of our other partners is great. So keep doing that. So,
Yeah. I think that when we are in the company of many other great organizations, even better things can happen. I forgot to mention, Larry, and I thought it's worthwhile sharing that in our first year of having that child abuse prevention program, we served nearly 1,000 families
1,000 families.
in that time. And out of that, over 98% of them did not have Child Protective Services contact or were not involved in the system. And that would not have been accomplished once again without our partnership with the Children's Foundation on that end. And something that, once again, we remain focused on how do we bring in other groups and entities to ensure that many more children and families can stay together, that they can be healthy, that they can be safe.
Excellent. And as you know, and I mentioned in our previous interview, the Children's Foundation is much more focused on the family now because of the obvious importance of a family structure and the impact it has on children. And my guess is no one believes that more than you.
Yeah, Larry, I've come to learn in my time serving these children, and we had at one time that singular focus. But we've come to learn that children are defined by two things: who they love and who loves them.
Right.
And absent of serving a child without his or her family, we're doing a great disservice to that. And
Right.
so we certainly commend partners like the Children's Foundation and many others who've come to learn and understand that we're not saving the child from anything. What we need to figure out is how do we build up that family unit from a holistic standpoint, physical, emotional, mental standpoint, to ensure that that family uh, can achieve all the great things that we know families are capable of achieving.
Wonderful. So last question is what do you have? I know you're an entrepreneur. I know that you have great vision. So what is on your plate for 2021?
Well, I was going to say, Larry, you kind of alluded to it, and probably first and foremost, it's just trying to keep up with Chris Lambert and
Right.
Life Remodeled.
Right. It's not
But
easy.
it's really taking on what we believe is a critical crisis facing children in Detroit, and that is their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we partner together with groups like Life Remodeled, the Children's Foundations, and many others who are singularly focused on this, what we believe is going to be an even larger crisis than what has been, what was just a year ago.
Right.
And so we're excited in the upcoming year as we continue to grow and serve more children and families and offer some new programs to fill some of the gaps that are in the community, but to really tackle this issue head on with many other wonderful partners.
Great. More to come on that. So thank you, Kevin Roach from Methodist Children's Home. Keep up the great work. And again, congratulations for being the nonprofit of the year by Crane's Detroit Business, who is our partner in this radio show. So thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Cheryl Johnson of Cots. When Caring for Kids continues here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR. Presented by the Children's Foundation. Once again, here's Larry Burns.
Cheryl Johnson is the Chief Executive Officer at Cots, where she has worked to improve the lives of homeless families in Detroit for more than 30 years. A staunch advocate for what is right rather than what is easy, Cheryl has led Cots through popular and unpopular transitions, all with the best interests of families in mind. Cheryl serves the community through broad service with groups such as New Detroit, Warrior Women Against Poverty, Authority Health, and Greenlight Fund. Cheryl also founded The Circle, a confidential, non-competitive network of African-American women and leaders. So, Cheryl, welcome to Caring for Kids.
Thank you so much, Larry. I'm excited about being here with you today.
Well, we're excited that you're here, and it's great to see you in person versus virtually.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, for a change.
yeah.
Yeah,
Things are getting better.
they are. Yes, knock on wood and say our prayers. So I recently had the opportunity to meet with you and several of your colleagues about COTS. And in particular, we talked about the wonderful things you're now doing for children and families,
Yeah.
which is music to my ears. And so can you give our listeners, maybe start with an overview of COTS and then talk a little bit now about what you're doing in those types of programs?
Yeah, so we will be 40 years old next year. So when I look back over the last 40 years, and I've had the pleasure of being there 30 of them,
Right.
to look at where we started from as an organization, focusing on the needs of all homeless people. That was single men, single women, and families, doing, of course, emergency shelter, transitional and affordable housing. But over the last few years, we've probably 7 years ago, we did kind of a halt. And part of that came about with hearing some of the families in the shelter say something like, I've been here before I was a child. And I'm
Yeah.
looking and hearing, okay, you were a child, and now a whole generation later, you're here with your children, right? So that was one thing. And the other piece was seeing the generations like multiply,
Right.
meaning more than two generations where you have parent and child or adult and child.
Grandparent.
But now you have grandparent, and one time it was 4 generations.
Yeah.
So Larry, that was something that we couldn't tolerate. And what do we do? So we've done all the housing, we get people housed. That's what we do in excellence. But the issue of poverty was a different thing for us, and especially generational poverty.
Right. Multi-generational poverty. So we're talking with Cheryl Johnson from COTS, and COTS certainly is one of the I think, iconic Detroit nonprofit brands.
Oh, we like to think
Yeah,
so.
so you've done a great job in your 30 years and in total 40 years of doing that. And as you've expanded, and I commend you for that too. And so the Children's Foundation, as I think you know, is now focusing more on the whole family
Mhm.
because I believe that if you have a dysfunctional family unit, chances are the children are going to have more chance of being dysfunctional and having
Absolutely.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so you've realized that as an organization. And how about mental health as it
Yeah.
relates to this family unit? And so what are some of the things you see?
Yeah.
And then what are some of the things that you're hoping to do and that you're already doing?
So well, some of the things we've recognized. First of all, we are a trauma-informed organization. We lead from that, understanding that over the lives not only of our children but adults that come through our doors, they have just been exposed to so much trauma in their lives,
Right.
right? So that impacts their the ability to think, their executive functioning skills. It impacts their emotions. And now we are in the middle of a pandemic. Like, so
Right.
you could, put all that on top of what's
Which
happening
the pandemic probably increases the opportunity for that trauma to take place in the home.
and shows up.
Yeah,
Right. So
right.
so you have, and you've heard this, you see domestic violence
Right.
on the rise. You
Right.
you see suicide
Yeah.
attempts in our children.
Right. It's just,
Right.
yeah.
And so that this pandemic has put a spotlight on all of that. And so for our response to that as a two-gen organization, that means we work with the entire family, is to make sure we, being responsible, have resources not only on site, but also referring them to the appropriate places for help and responding immediately
Right.
for them. So that has been a really uptick for us in doing that and seeing the responses and the positive outcomes for our families.
Yeah. Wonderful. So on the lighter side, a little bit, you just had a virtual special event.
Sioux City.
Yes. And my
Yeah.
good friend, Alexander Zonchek,
He was
performed.
wonderful. He's so wonderful.
He was so excited about that.
Yes, yes.
So tell our listeners how it went and what was it like to put on a virtual event and how did it go?
We had so much fun, and Larry, we think about it. We've done Soup City for over 20 years, but it's always been in place. So
Yeah,
this was the first
right.
year to do it virtually, but to actually see it on WADL, our friends, and making sure that happened. Alexander came in with some amazing music, and on top of that, we were able to introduce our families
Mhm.
to a larger audience and them to focus on their triumphs. The things
Yeah.
that they have worked through, the
To
wonderful
celebrate
things they are
some of the
doing
things they've done.
right now. So it was a celebratory evening, lots of fun. And believe it or not, the party is still going on. People can come to our website
Okay.
and still have access to that great evening and enjoy it.
All right. So speaking of that, I always ask my guests, how can people help? So how would they find the website in that event?
So it's COTS, COTS Detroit.org.
CotsDetroit.org. That's
Yep,
easy.
that's easy.
Yeah.
Click and you'll see the virtual party.
Wonderful. And so you've mentioned that you've been at Cots. We're talking with Cheryl Johnson for 30 years, and the organization is 40 years old. And so what's on the horizon? As you and I know, and our listeners will know in a second, that you're going to be meeting with some of my colleagues on the grant side soon, and
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that you become a partner of ours as it relates
But we're
to
excited,
your
and
programs.
thank you, Larry. We are excited about the future. We are excited about the Peterborough Arms, which is opening right downtown. This is a brand new affordable housing for our families. We're looking at expanding that because one of the things that's so necessary to stabilize our families is affordable
Affordable housing.
housing.
Tell
And
us a
that's
little
the
bit more
thing.
about that, where it's located.
So it's 26 Peterborough. It
Okay.
was the formal Imperial hotel built back in the 20s. It was our headquarters for a number of years.
Okay.
And so to go in there now to see this beautiful marble floor lobby with a piano that was donated by a
Wow.
wonderful donor, and colorful furniture. And all of the apartments, 2 and 3 bedrooms, were fully furnished. So literally, our families are moving in to a turnkey
Wow.
apartment with all kinds of amenities for
And
them.
that whole community, that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that whole community has had a resurgence of
Oh, absolutely.
restaurants.
So
and-
it's the place to live,
Yeah,
right?
it's
And for
very
our
cool.
families to be a part of that. And I was talking to one of the families, her name is Brenda. Brenda said, my kids get to be able to just walk down the street to Campus Marshes and
Yeah.
enjoy that.
Right.
I get to just walk over to Whole Foods. It's easy.
Right.
You know, all those amenities that she didn't have before.
Yeah, no, that the pandemic, kind of put a little bit of some brakes on some of that development, but Detroit's resilient, and
And we're all pivoting.
yeah, we're
Right?
all pivoting.
Yeah.
And so, when will that actually open?
So our families are moving in now.
Okay,
So this minute they have moved in, and we're just about finished with the entire project.
great. Cheryl, anything else you want to bring up for our listeners about COTS?
Yeah, so I would say to go to our website,
All right,
look at
good.
some opportunities. We're still entertaining volunteers in a very safe way.
Okay,
And so we still need that. And so please go to cotsdetroit.org.
that's easy. We'll post that as well. So thank you very much for all
Thank
you're
you for having
doing.
me.
I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation about our partnership, and we'll get Alexander to maybe do something for both of us.
Wonderful.
We'll force him to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl Johnson of Cots. And coming up next, I'm going to tell you about some exciting things going on at the Children's Foundation. And it's all right here on the great voice of the Great Lakes. News Talk 760 WJR. Welcome back, everybody. Larry Burns here. We had a great show tonight. February 2021 as the year moves on. It's going to be a much better year than last year, that's for sure. I'm pleased to let you know that we're working hard at planning 2 great events this spring. In April, we're going to be holding our Child and Adolescent Behavioral Health Summit. This year, our event will be virtual and has a great lineup, variety of topics, so look for more information coming up regarding that. We're also gearing up for our 5th annual Derby for Kids. This year's Derby is scheduled for May 1st in person, and we're planning for a great event at the Country Club of Detroit, raising funds, most importantly, for pediatric cancer research at the Children's Hospital of Michigan and Mott Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor. You can learn more about both of those events on our website. So thanks for joining us on Caring for Kids, and most importantly, for your continued support of the Children's Foundation. Be safe, stay healthy, onward.
Caring for Kids with Larry Burns on WJR has been presented by the Children's Foundation.